Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Waits and I'm the chair of Coaster Capital, and I've got a very, very brief introduction to say welcome to everybody. Thank you very, very much for coming. I hope you're going to enjoy what looks to be an excellent afternoon. But my main aim is to introduce Julie Capsalis, who's going to open the day. Julie's just been appointed Vice Chair, and we're just delighted that you've taken it up, Julie, and looking forward to working with you. But I'm now going to hand over to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I'd also like to echo Tim's welcome to you all, and thank you very much for coming today. Engaging and listening to our partners and stakeholders is absolutely critical to our success, and I really look forward to the opportunity to speak to as many of you as possible today. So this AGM comes at a key time for Coaster Capital. Just over a year ago, we launched our strategic economic plan, Gatwick 360. You'll have a chance to hear more about this from our Chief Executive, Jonathan Sharrock. He'll update you on the achievements to date and some of the challenges that lie ahead. And as we reflect on these challenges and opportunities, we have two sessions on the local industrial strategy. The first will look at research findings and the evidence base, and the second will be a chance to discuss what our local industrial strategy should look like in an interactive session led by Claire Mason. I'm then particularly pleased to be hosting a discussion and interview with Wincy Wong, Head of the Rose Review implementation at RBS and NatWest. The Rose Review is a key report and series of recommendations on female entrepreneurship. Over 10 years ago, I had the privilege of serving as an advisor to the government's Women's Enterprise Task Force, and I'm absolutely delighted that this work is now being moved forward and being led by one of the UK's leading businesswomen. For me, one of the most compelling pieces of the report is an updated evidence base and data that demonstrates the absolute economic imperative of investing and supporting more women-owned businesses. This session will also reflect Coaster Capital's commitment to diversity and supporting more business startups and business growth. Just over a year ago, I was appointed as Diversity Champion for the board. Along with championing diversity in its broadest sense in the region, I'm also delighted to be working with Enterprise M3 LEP and other Southern LEPs to develop and disseminate best practice in this area. Coaster Capital is a magnificently diverse region. In fact, I believe this is one of our greatest assets. As a board and organisation, we have to ensure that our people represent, reflect and celebrate this diversity. The past 12 months have seen significant changes on the Coaster Capital board, as many of the original founding board members reached the end of their terms of office. On a personal level, I'd like to thank Steve Allen, my predecessor as Vice Chair, and Phil Jones for their support and passion. A huge gap in the board has also been created through the illness of Daryl Gaylor, who many of you will know. During my 6 years on the board, Daryl has been a mentor, friend and absolute inspiration. As he continues his recovery from his stroke, I know that you will join me in passing on our very best wishes to him, and I look forward to visiting him to update him on today's events. Change on the board, however, creates opportunity for new members, new ideas and new knowledge. Many of our board members are here today, so please do take the chance to speak to them and give us your views. We have a very strong and committed board with an outstanding range of skills and expertise. And this diversity is key to helping us develop and deliver a local industrial strategy that truly represents the strengths of our region. Lastly, I feel very strongly that our approach to diversity is not just about gender, age or ethnicity, but about championing inclusion, social mobility and addressing disparities in our region. It's about recognising the vast range of areas where the LEP works and plays a role. And I was reminded of this at an investment committee that I chaired last week, where we were covering projects that included skills, innovation, business space, natural capital, town centre redevelopment, fibre, connectivity, roads and housing. In reviewing these projects and the transformational impacts that they could have, it reminded me of the challenges and opportunities that we face and how we must work together to truly achieve our vision to be the best place in the UK to live, grow and succeed. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Jonathan Sharrock, our Chief Executive.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm champing at the bit to get up here and speak to you all, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for coming, and it's great to see so many of you here today in Epsom. So I'm Jonathan Sharrock, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the year that we've had in Coast to Capital since we met 12 months ago in Brighton and we launched our strategy, Gatwick 360. So 12 months ago we launched our strategy, Gatwick 360, and obviously all of you in your businesses and your daily lives will have seen how much change is going on around us in politics, in the economy, in all sorts of aspects of how the UK works at the moment. The key thing when I look at the year of change that Coast to Capital has gone through is I feel that we have been very much in control of the change that we've been able to bring about in our work. I feel that insofar as you can be in control in this very complex environment, the LEP's done an excellent job at trying to get our message across and bring the opinions of people with us. Gatwick 360 has been a hugely important asset there because it's been allowed us to explain to people from outside the region what this region can offer to the UK economy, how significant our contribution can be, and really what we can bring to the country as it goes forward. Having that confidence that we know what we're talking about has really changed our posture with government. We've been able to talk to most government departments, all of our local MPs, and many other important stakeholders around government so that we can explain what we can bring to the UK as it develops. And we've been able, also on the back of Gatwick 360, to make some other changes. So we've changed our brand that you'll see in all of the material around us today, which again helps communicate the professionalism that we have as an organisation. We've moved offices, and if you work closely with us, you'll have seen that we've moved from our slightly careworn offices in Horsham, which we'd outgrown, to a modest but much more professional set of premises in Crawley, which we're very pleased with and gives us a lot more scope for working with all our partners. We've also been able to ride some changes to the organisation very well. So the first change that's happened to us is our boundaries have changed. The government was very keen that LEPs shouldn't have overlaps between one another, and that's required us to change our boundaries, with some parts of the region being confirmed in our neighbouring LEPs. But we've really taken that as a huge opportunity, and both Tim Waits and I have been able to start to bring together and lead a wider grouping of southern LEPs, which we're very pleased is now starting to have an impact with ministers and starting to be understood as a counterpoint to the North and the Midlands and the Oxford to Cambridge arc. So the southern LEPs, which you'll be hearing a lot more of over the next 12 months, goes from the Solent all the way through the southern counties of England, over to Essex and Hertfordshire. And it's that group of places, that group of LEPs, that can then form a really strong partnership with London and demonstrate how our part of the UK can make a difference. And of course, Coast to Capital's got very significant historic links with London, given our relationship with Croydon over the years. And I believe we're very well placed to do that as we go forward. So the change for us has been significant, but it's been something that we've been very well placed to ride. And all of this is about maximising our influence as we go through the next 12 months. Now, in my career, I've been very clear that you have to make your own luck in terms of environments as they change and the operating environment as it changes. And there's a slide that will come up in a second that will just show you the different steps we're taking to do that. So the very first step, of course, is the publication of Gatwick 360, which demonstrates what we want to achieve as a region. The second step shows the significant amount of work we've had to do to build government and Parliament's confidence in us as a delivery partner. Now, all of you in public sector organisations know that you kind of live or die reputationally by the assessment that you have from government about how well you're doing. And the good news is that we, as an organisation, are rated as good in all of our areas of activity. So good on our governance, good on our projects, good on our strategy. Puts us in the top 10 of LEPs and starting to become one of those places that government can naturally turn to as a good partner. The board has asked me to increase that assessment so we get at least one excellent in the year ahead, which we're well on track for doing, with an ambition of being one of the very best LEPs nationally. Building on that, we've started to really deepen our partnership, working with lots of people in the room and the different sectors that we work with. So with our public sector partners, we've been able to put a significant amount of effort into the new transport body for the South East, TFSE, which will be the new local government-led vehicle for bringing control of transport infrastructure back to elected politicians in our region. Very supportive of that, and delighted that one of our business board members is on the board of TFSE, as well as many of our politicians. We've been able to contribute massively to Greater Brighton and also to the work being done at county level to get a different strategic approach in the counties. So very much an excellent partner to local government, and in line with that, an excellent partner to our businesses as well. And there have been a number of events over the year that have really begun to cement our relationships with businesses. So work that we've been doing with the cultural sector to start to understand opportunities in the region for the cultural economy that the government's very keen on. Work with the railway sector about how we're going to get our railways improved. And then thematic work across the region on issues like skills, the future of our rural economy, and other really significant issues where we have so much business-led expertise in the region, and we as a region really need to harness it. So as we move up these pie charts, I believe that these bar charts, I believe that we're building the conditions for our future success. On the back of that, we can be able to be seen as a really strong vehicle for growth and go into our local industrial strategy with real confidence. Now, the local industrial strategy is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, but just a few words quickly on how we're doing on delivering the existing programme of work. Now, the government has given all LEPs capital money to deliver. We have had more than £300 million of funds and £275 million of grant funding. And we've got a very significant portfolio of projects, 85 projects, with more to come, as Julie said, in the next couple of weeks. Our goal, basically, is to fully deliver all of the outputs that we have promised to deliver to government. That's a 100% success rate on all of the outputs that we've promised. Now, that's not easy, because 85 projects requires 85 different partnerships with all of our different delivery bodies. But we believe that as the LEP, we have to be really clear about the importance of delivery so that the region is seen as a great place to spend money. Of course, above all, we've got to show that the outputs we deliver are nationally relevant. There would be no point spending the money on local projects that had a marginal local benefit. We need to be focusing on the projects that are going to transform the reputation of this region. And I just want to talk you through three of the best projects that do that, where there has been or will very shortly be very significant progress. The first of these, opening next week, the Fairfield Halls in Croydon, will be opened by Dame Judi Dench. It's going to be a hugely significant cultural asset for the whole region. The scale of the Fairfield Halls makes it significantly bigger than any of the local theatres or local entertainment places that you might be familiar with, which of course have a very important purpose. But we see Fairfield Halls as a way of really confirming our region as a magnet for the cultural economy more widely. So there'll be 1,300 jobs generated around the Fairfield Halls, jobs in the cultural sectors. It'll have its own orchestra, its own theatre, its own dance company, a large number of jobs rooted in Croydon, and with a catchment area that goes all the way down the M23 corridor, will be a very significant asset for our region. If you need a benchmark for the Fairfield Halls nationally, it's not quite at the level of the Royal Albert Hall or the Barbican as a real national asset, but it is equivalent to the Sage in Gateshead or some of these other big anchor institutions that you see in other parts of the UK. So a real chance to put the spotlight on our region. And many of you will know that it's reputed to have the best acoustics in the UK in its main concert hall, as a perfectly designed building in the 1960s. Another really, really important investment, Gatwick Railway Station. Now, we've talked a lot about the importance of Gatwick to our economy in this place, but just in the last few months, the government's announced a £150 million upgrade to Gatwick Airport. Gatwick Airport is the 8th busiest railway station outside of London, so it's significantly busier than most of the city railway stations that you find in other parts of the UK. And of course, what makes it most significant is it's the station where you have by far and away the most people who've got mobility needs. It doesn't just mean that it's people with disability, it means most of the passengers at the railway station have got huge suitcases with them, and you can see whenever you travel there. So the design we're going to have at this station is going to make Gatwick stand out nationally as a place with excellent wayfinding, excellent public access, excellent access to trains, so that frankly people arriving into the UK get a really good perception not just of the country but of our region, and it will be an extremely impressive piece of civil engineering to deliver that, reflecting the extremely impressive railway service that the airport offers. And thirdly, to come back to the Brighton 5G testbed. I talked about this when we were in Brighton, at which point it had just been launched, but it's worth coming back to it again. What we can all see is that 5G is becoming a thing in the public media. In the discussion about mobile services and mobile networks, 5G is starting to come through as a consumer offering. Our area is far ahead of the game. We've had now for nearly 18 months a 5G testbed down in New England House. 100 business opportunities have been developed over that time, which means 100 sort of credible, innovative projects, mostly by SMEs, starting to look at how different aspects of the economy can adapt to 5G. 5G is the Internet of Things, effectively. It's automation at a large scale. It's a huge opportunity for us to adopt a new technology and be leaders. So we're really excited to see innovation coming through in the cultural sector, in all sorts of different applications, which we believe will start to make Brighton and the digital coast all the way along to Bognor Regis the place where digital industries are going to want to go, with huge investment in the fibre infrastructure to support that. So across the portfolio, you can see these numbers. Now, the numbers don't mean very much in isolation, apart from to show you that they are very significant challenges. You know, the number of houses, the amount of business space, the amount of roads that we're committed to delivering in the next 18 months. But the numbers are potential game changers. I mean, just to pull out the 731,000 square metres of business space, that alone constitutes about a third of total annual demand for business space in the region, and we'll come on to talk about the huge demand for business space that our region has. So the Coastal Capital projects will start to make a difference and will start to be seen, allow us to start to be seen as an area that's making a difference. I just want to talk through a couple of other areas of enormous achievement over the last year. And many of you will be familiar with our Growth Hub that we have run for 3 years. We brought it back in-house from a failed external contract, and it really has gone from strength to strength. Over the last year, we've supported about 800 businesses, small and medium-sized companies who come to us for help on how are they going to grow and how can they expand their business. What we've been able to do is 3 things. We've been able to amplify the support we give them by engaging the help of 30 specialist growth champions, so people from particular economic sectors who can be very expert at giving tailored advice where it's needed. The second thing we've been able to do is really validate the success of our work. So we are absolutely delighted that we're the only LEP selected by Royal Bank of Scotland to have a banker in residence. As far as we know at the moment, the only one that's working. There were 2 chosen and we've hit the ground running. So, you know, with Vicky, we have a banker in residence who's able to bring financial support into that, which represents a huge vote of confidence in us from NatWest. And thirdly, and secondly, also recognition by HMRC of the importance of what we do. So we've also been selected by HMRC as a benchmark study so they can start to gauge what the impact of our Growth Hub work has been. We're also able to provide grant funding for businesses, and last year £800,000 of capital grants to 15 businesses to help them invest in their capital. We've another 35 businesses in the pipeline, all seen by the Growth Hub, all understood, all validated as excellent growing companies with huge potential, and we're really excited at the opportunity to consider them for capital grants to help them take the next step in their business growth. So a really successful product there. Another enormously exciting and very successful product from Coastal Capital has been our Escalator programme. What we've done here since January is create a peer-to-peer learning network to find some of the most capable and ambitious business owners in the region, from the scale-up businesses, you know, the ones that have the most potential to become large businesses of the future. And those scale-up businesses are working with us, with MD Hub, our partners, to get proper peer-to-peer learning so that they can learn from each other what are the steps they need to take to grow their businesses. As to our knowledge, this is the only such programme in the country, and something of increasing interest to the government, so something we're really proud of and will be aiming to roll out across the whole region over the next period. Before I move on to the local industrial strategy, I ought to just say something about the economic context, and I won't be giving you the answers to anything, I'm afraid. It's obviously a very challenging time, a potentially confusing time in terms of the direction that the country is going to take in relation to Brexit, with more detail to come over the next few weeks and months. But we do know two things which I should tell you about the position that the government's taking and the role that it's asking Coast Capital to play. So the first is that they have made available, the ministers have made available a fund of £10 million to any business representative organisation to help provide more resources to advise small businesses on the impact of Brexit. This is primarily targeted at our colleagues in the chambers, in the FSB, in specialist trade associations who'll be bidding for it. And our role is to support them, help increase the impact of their bids and make sure that as much money as possible comes into our region, which we're working hard on doing with many of you in the audience. The second thing is just in the last week, ministers have confirmed the role that they'd like LEPs to play in helping businesses prepare for and adapt to the changes that leaving the EU will bring. So we will be working with our colleagues across the Southern LEP network that I described before in a larger group of LEPs, really focusing on getting as much information that we can out of the local economy so that we can give a really clear message to ministers on the impact that Brexit preparation and then Brexit is having on you. There'll be a lot more detail to come on this in the next few days and weeks, but there will be a very concerted attempt to hear your stories and play those stories back to ministers. The second thing we'll be doing is we'll be acting as a channel so that the government's information can come clearly into the region, using our growth hub, using our platforms that exist already, and hosting ministers and government officials when they come out to the region and give formal events and presentations on what they think it will mean. So we do have dates and we do have venues that we're starting to discuss with the different government departments on when we bring them to Gatwick, when we bring them to Brighton, when we bring them to Surrey, and we're talking about 4 or 5 quite significant events to provide a platform for businesses to engage. So watch this space, more to come, but an important role for us, which we're very keen to do, and a promise that we will work with all of you as that journey goes on to support you as much as we can. One of our roles, of course, is to feed your views back. So phones out. Let's hope it works this time. Just a quick snapshot from you. What do you think about Brexit for your organisation? Don't think about it too much. Do you think it'll be positive or negative, or you don't know? That would be really helpful. Okay. So that's a picture with most people expressing a view, believing it will be negative, but a significant number of people not sure what it means. And I think that really articulates the challenge we face. We need to work much more closely together and with ministers to explain and understand what the impact of these changes will mean and make sure that we can respond as best as we can to those. I'm going to move on now, in the last couple of minutes from me, just to talk about the local industrial strategy. And then I'll hand over to some colleagues to go into a bit more detail for you. So the key thing to say, of course, is at a time of uncertainty, we as an organisation are very much focused on the next phase of investment in our region. And whatever happens, whether that's in Brexit, in a general election or any other scenario, that our region is getting as much investment as it deserves and helping to tackle the challenges that we know exist in the local economy. And of course, it's imperative that we do that because all across the country, our colleagues, whether that's in the northern cities, in the towns of the Midlands or the coastal towns or the big metropolis of London, are doing exactly the same. And whoever is in government, we will be in competition with them to get as much money as we can for the region. So we're very strongly advised by the civil servants that the best way to do that is to prepare properly for an industrial strategy, a local industrial strategy, because any decisions that are taken on future funding will be evidence-based. And at the moment, the government doesn't have a clear view of what the economic performance is of all of the regions of England. So that's our challenge. And the work that we're going to do over the next 6 months, which I'll come on to explain to you, is about developing a local industrial strategy. 7 local industrial strategies have already been published, and you may wish to peruse them at your leisure. For my money, the best ones are from Oxfordshire and the west of England, which is Bristol and Bath. There are others, but I think these are the most compelling and they're the most relevant to us as well. And what these regions do is bring out much more clearly than I previously understood what their potential is as a region. And in that you can see the ingredients of a successful local industrial strategy for Coast to Capital. You know, not making any assumptions about what we might be entitled to, not making any assumptions about ministers viewing us favourably or unfavourably, but being absolutely cold-eyed about the detail of how our economy is working, what are the challenges we face and what are the opportunities we face, and above all, demonstrating why this area is the best area of the country for particular types of business to grow and expand. And I think what we can see across all of the local industrial strategies is a real focus, a real interest from government on what are the conditions like for private enterprise in your area, what are the sectors that have taken root already, and what do you need in place to attract the next generation of successful businesses. And that's because the global economy will change significantly over the century and particularly over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's the target. Work is very well underway, and we will be talking to you about that in more detail in the next presentation. So I thought I'd just boil down our plan into 3 easy sections for you. The first thing is we have developed a comprehensive evidence base, which our colleague Chris Paddock from Hatch Regeneris will talk you through in the next presentation. We will be consulting on that evidence base next week. That will be a 6-week consultation process and a chance for all of you to tell us what you think about the evidence base and above all to share with us evidence that you might have which is missing. So we already have a good evidence base in Gatwick 360. We think we're taking it to the next level and probably beyond when the work our consultants have done to us, but you know, it's not perfect and we need your help to fill in any gaps that you see. So that's the first phase. Once that consultation is finished, at the end of the year, in November and December, we will be working very hard on how we turn all that evidence into a compelling narrative for the region. And Claire Mason, one of our board members, will be talking you through how we develop that compelling narrative. You know, the absolute importance of being eye-catching, professional, engaging in describing our region with no assumptions about what we're entitled to, but every attempt to play a competitive game really, really well. And Claire will talk us through that. The board will then take a decision on the approach we're taking to the local industrial strategy in early January at their meeting. And then we will begin a negotiation with government, which I expect will be in the first few months of next year. And the key word there is negotiation. We cannot decide what's in our local industrial strategy. We'll have to persuade ministers and, above all, Treasury civil servants of the best way of seeing our region. And they, in turn, will have expectations of us and challenges that they'll put to us. So that's the frame we're in. And above all, imperative that we work with everybody in doing that. And as well as the board, we have a joint committee meeting of all of our political leaders to do that. And we will have a number of further stakeholder engagements with all of you, with local authority stakeholders, education sector and businesses to do this. But the next phase is to explain our research, which I'll hand over to Chris to do. I would just say in finishing that it's an absolute privilege and a pleasure on a personal basis to lead this organisation and do this work. It really is an incredibly exciting journey that we're on as a region, and one that I very much enjoy working with. I'm very grateful to all of you for the support and above all the challenge that you give us. You know, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well, and often many of you are good at challenging us and, you know, encouraging us to look at things that we haven't previously thought of. I do believe that is the way that we'll come up with a good local industrial strategy. It's not because we know everything, it's because the LEP is the tribune and the vehicle for really raising issues, which may sometimes be uncomfortable, but raising issues and inviting you to engage on them. And in the 3 years I've done this job, I've always been very grateful for the engagement and support you've all given. Long may it continue. And the next step is for Chris, our consultant, to come and talk us through the evidence base as it is. So, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris Paddock. I work for an economic research consultancy called Hatch Regeneris, and we are in the midst of the biggest piece of economic research ever undertaken for the coastal capital area. So, bad news is you're not going to be able to see everything that's on these slides. There's a lot of information on them. Good news, there's opportunity to see this and a hell of a lot more evidence in the consultation pack that will be sent out and made available to you for the next 6 weeks. So if there's anything you can't quite see, feel free to ask the question at the end of this, but do be rest assured that it will all be there for you to wallow in over the coming weeks and think about and then consult on properly. So we've produced the economic profile, which is about 120 pages worth of economic analysis for the coastal capital area. That has been informed by 5 other research studies. There is a study into urban centres within the coastal capital area, the diverse range of towns and town centres and high streets that make up the economy of the area. There is a piece of research looking at commercial property, offices, industrial areas, retail across the area. There's a piece of work undertaken by our friends at Metro Dynamics looking at innovation and R&D in the area. There's a piece of work looking at skills that we've been undertaking, looking at skills and the labour market, and then there's a piece of work looking at digital connectivity. So as I said, a big wide range of information that I'm going to give you just a taste of today with a few thoughts of my own on what this all means, and then we can have a discussion after that. I will check my watch because this is a 20-minute presentation and there's a lot to get through. Okay, so understanding recent performance. When you produced your SEP, this was the sort of chart you built your SEP around. This looks at relative GVA economic output within the area per head within the coastal capital area relative to the UK and in comparison to other areas. And what that tells us is that the economic output per resident living within the coastal capital area has declined over the last 15 or 20 years relative to the UK, to a point now where the GVA per head is below the UK average. Now, GVA per head is actually a slightly alternative measure of productivity. When you look at the GVA per hour worked within the coastal capital area, things are ostensibly a lot more positive. So for every hour worked within the boundary of our area, that is worth £35 to the UK economy, and that's the 7th highest of all of the LEPs within the country. Good news, however, the gap between you and other LEPs has closed over that period, and other LEPs, like places like Cheshire and Warrington, which is growing very rapidly, South East Midlands LEP, west of England, are catching up and overtaking coastal capital. So when I looked at this chart, I thought, great, 7th in the UK, but no room for complacency, and actually, if things carry on as they are at the moment, there is potential that the LEP area will become less competitive over time. So digging down into this a little bit more, looking at recent employment growth over the last 5 years, this chart has all of your local authority areas. It has coastal capital in pink there, South East region in green, and the UK in grey. This looks at just employment growth over that period. Over the last 5 or 6 years, the LEP is 23rd of the 38 LEPs in terms of employment growth. And there's a great deal of variety between the different local authority areas in terms of employment growth over that period. When we look at business growth, things are slightly more positive. So 18th out of the 38 LEPs. Some areas growing very quickly. Croydon, Crawley, Brighton and Hove have all grown relatively quickly over that period from a high baseline. A lot of these places, you have to think about the baseline when you look at them, but things slightly better in terms of business growth. Actually, in the work that we do, similar economic strategy work we do for LEPs and cities around the UK, I think it's probably the more savvier places, the places that are more focused on productivity, that will focus on business growth rather than employment growth. because if you grow your business base, you tend to provide more high-value jobs within an economy, and that drives up productivity. So when you're thinking about the balance between employment and business, I think for Coaster Capital, business is probably the area that I would focus in terms of growth. However, statistics in terms of business startups are a very mixed picture. You've only got a few, I think 3 local authority areas that have a business startup rate above the UK average, and they are Brighton and Hove, Crawley and Croydon. So Gatwick, Brighton and Hove and Croydon are the big drivers of business startups within the area. A lot of places are way below the UK average in terms of business startup. And again, this story of disparity is something I'm going to come back to again and again within this presentation. A chart that you certainly won't be able to read is this one, which was provided by our friends at Metro Dynamics, but I think it's very interesting because it starts to think about the drivers of productivity within an area like Coaster Capital, and it gives us 2 different axes to look at. One is GVA per hour worked, which I've already mentioned, which is this one here, up the right-hand side, and then across the top, economic complexity, and that's their own measure of specialisation, innovation within the economy. And you have quite specialist activity. Your economy is very diverse, and your economy per hour worked is relatively productive. But what's happening is that's happening in silos. That's happening in specific nodes, specific businesses, specific places, and the benefits of that and the potential spillover agglomeration benefits that you might see in a successful economic region are not being redistributed around the region. They're going elsewhere. They're staying internally. So at the moment, the region's doing okay, and in specific areas, it's doing brilliantly. But the benefits of that are not being spread across the region, and as such, the sort of things clustering, development of more complex supply chains, development of more skilled careers and jobs are really not being realised as a result of the positive activity that's happening in certain locations, and that then has ramifications for what Julie was talking about in terms of social mobility and general improvement in places across the region. So our 5 research studies help us to understand why this is happening and why there is this kind of fundamental challenge within the region at the moment. I'm just going to alight on a couple of facts and slides from each of those and tell you why I think that the region has this challenge and the sort of messages that you need to be going back to, or Jonathan needs to be going back to government with in negotiating the local industrial strategy. So, first up is skills. Now, through the Skills Action Plan process, we are able to access research which tells us the most difficult positions to fill for local businesses. And local businesses, through the national skills research, tell us that there is a significant gap relative to the UK in terms of associate professionals. And that's a kind of funny definition, but these are people that do things in a business. So, you know, I have my own business. I employ a lot of people. It's the people who work for me are doing things. It's those doers which people are struggling to recruit. And when we've spoken to the bigger businesses within the Coaster Capital area, that's what they've told us. They said it is difficult for us to recruit and retain employable staff who will turn up to work, are well trained, are prepared to adapt to the changing needs of our businesses. And sort of do things and help us to grow. And whilst there are other gaps, I think that's the most significant. That's the most significant one within that research. When we've actually talked to businesses as well, the labour market is so tight. Businesses are reluctant to train people because they see that if they train people, then they're likely to move on and get another job elsewhere. So there's a barrier to people training, and most people get their skills being trained on the job. So there's a kind of dual challenge within the skills strategy in terms of finding the right motivated, skilled people to fill the position, and then keeping them and being able to invest in them in the long term. Something very specific to you. It's very rare that I would present a population pyramid. So a population pyramid is this chart on the left, which starts at 0 and goes up to 90 and 90 plus. And it shows us the number of people living within the area within different age groups, male on the left, female on the right. And then there's a line on the outside which shows a relative position. One of the big issues for coastal capital at the moment is there's not enough people aged 20 to 40 who are skilled working in the area, or indeed even living in the area and going off to work elsewhere. What you have got is a lot of people of retirement age or coming up to retirement age who are not being replaced within the labour market. And that's a significant challenge to future productivity and competitiveness within the area. Because if I'm a business looking to locate somewhere within coastal capital, I would look at this and I'd think, where am I going to get my workforce from? And one of the reasons for that, the chart on the right as you look, is housing affordability and availability. So every local authority location within the coastal capital area has an affordability ratio, which is the cost of housing relative to wages, above the UK average. In certain locations, Mole Valley, Chichester, Epsom and Ewell, where we are today, Tandridge, that's kind of up around 10, an affordable ratio of 10. So people need to buy a house in those locations. People would need 10 times the average wage paid in those locations. So affordability is a big barrier to providing a skilled workforce, we think. Okay, moving on to urban centres. There was a report in the news today about retail and about vacancy within town centres. This is the data that report used on vacancy. Now the report in the news, very bad news for the retail sector, was all about multiple retailers, brand names leaving the high street. This is a bit broader. It looks at just vacancy rate generally within each of the centres within the coastal capital area where there's more than 10,000 people living within a certain catchment area. You can see within that vacancy rates above the British average. Actually, there's only 7 centres with a vacancy rate above the British average. Croydon is the highest. Croydon, Newhaven and Ewell are the highest, with vacancy rates around about 20%. When we look at the change over time, more centres have seen a more negative change in relation to the UK, so it's certainly something to watch. Interestingly, when you look at the coastal centres, they seem to have been more resilient to retail shocks over the last couple of years. My theory on that is that they had their shock a while ago and now are probably more focused on local markets, and actually there's less multiples to leave because they actually left a number of years ago. The urban centres research is quite a detailed document, and it really shows us the diversity of this area and how different all of the places are across the coastal capital area. Certainly more so than a lot of the other LEP areas that we've worked in. What we've tried to do through that research is think about the types of interventions that need to take place in different urban centres, town centres, city centres, high streets within the coastal capital area. All of them need some sort of project or investment or intervention, but the type of intervention is different depending upon the capacity for growth, the economic need, the amount of private sector investment going into the area. And what we've started to do is develop this quadrant where we've taken a mix of different data sets, about 20 different data sets, and tried to define the centres on the basis of the opportunity and capacity for growth and the sort of greatest need to do something different and make good things happen. And what we get is different groups of centres. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got places where the need and the opportunity is probably less, and that's because there's less capacity to grow and change those centres. However, there is still a need to think about how they might evolve to changing markets and become more diverse in their offer. Moving up to the left, we've got centres where there's certainly a need to do something, but there's less capacity for growth. Places like Littlehampton, Shoreham, Lewis, Caterham. These are places that kind of need a short-term intervention to diversify high street uses, maybe bring some new economic activity into the centre. To the right, there are locations where there is both need and opportunity. So there's potential to grow, there's potential to diversify, but there is a need for investment, and there's maybe a gap in terms of the will of the private sector to invest in that. So maybe a more fundamental intervention is needed to bring forward master plans, to bring forward new commercial and employment space in locations like Chichester, Newhaven, Bognor Regis. And then the bottom quadrant are locations where there's certainly a big opportunity to do something significant, but actually we're already seeing private sector demand bringing that forward. So the role of an organisation like the LEP may well be to steward and guide that private sector investment over time. So this is very much a work in progress, and we would very much welcome comments on this through the consultation, but it's us starting to think about how we can start to group locations together in ways other than just their geographic proximity to something, so that the LEP can be more agile in how it responds. Right, commercial property is one of our fundamentals. As Jonathan's already said, there is huge demand for commercial property in a lot of locations across the LEP area, particularly within the Gatwick Diamond. When we look at rental and sales transactions, there's a significant amount of churn, and there's a significant amount of demand. There's a hell of a lot of demand in Brighton and Hove, but Brighton and Hove is very constrained by its supply, and increasingly you're actually seeing commercial development come forward across the coastal area to satisfy that additional demand that comes out of Brighton and Hove. Because there are challenges around supply, we've seen rents increase quite a lot over the last 5 years, particularly in and around Gatwick and the Gatwick Diamond area, but also down the Brighton main line to Brighton itself. We've seen less change in prices around rural West Sussex and the sort of western part of the coast moving down from Brighton. So we can see within the commercial study, and again this is a big study that I'm trying to summarise in 2 slides, so there's a ton of demand. I think the issue at the moment is generalising quite a bit that the market is not providing the quality of space that the types of businesses that we would like to locate within Coastal Capital will demand. So when we start to analyse the transactions that have taken place, we can see that most of those, and this is a designation that's provided by CoStar, who provide us with data on commercial property transactions, there are very few, if any, office or industrial transactions above a 3-star rating, which is kind of average. Apart from a little bit of office space in Croydon, and then a very small amount of industrial space around Gatwick Diamond. Not providing that higher quality space is a barrier to the growth in the region's economy, and I think productivity, particularly when you compare it to your neighbours in Enterprise M3, to Oxfordshire, who are already bringing their list forward, and to London as well. If you look at lease deals in terms of quality, London LEP is clearly delivering much more quality office space than anywhere else, but Enterprise M3 is delivering more than you. When you look at industrial space, where there's a hell of a lot of demand at the moment, very little 4 or 5 star quality office space being delivered at the moment compared to Enterprise M3, where 30% of the deals are in 4 or 5 star office quality. So in relative terms, I think there's a need to address that issue as we think about what we might do in the lease. Digital connectivity. So this was a piece of work undertaken by Fifth Sector. I mean, there's a lot of good access to ultra-fast broadband in the region, in the urban areas, and actually that's pretty good when you compare it to the rest of the country. But some significant issues when it comes to looking at provision in rural areas where there are some quite significant, what we would call, not spots. The issue at the moment is investment in digital infrastructure is not particularly well coordinated, and businesses, I think, aren't really understanding the incentives that are available to them to help them invest in their digital infrastructure as well. So there are voucher schemes and incentives for businesses to invest in what is called fibre to the premises, the sort of best broadband that you can get, and businesses just aren't taking that up. So Fifth Sector have suggested two main intervention areas here. One is coordinating the spine of digital infrastructure that is future-proof for the long-term evolution of the coast to capital area, but then also playing a role as conduit in getting the information across so that businesses are investing in their own digital infrastructure, and when the opportunities become available are taking advantage of the fact that this is a trailblazer area in terms of 5G. So finally, Metro Dynamics, our friends and competitors, have been doing some research into the innovation economy. As I said before, when I talked about their previous chart, they've identified a hell of a lot of internationally significant investment in R&D and innovation within the coast to capital area. They've started to look at where that's happening, and there's a significant amount happening in Manor Royal. There's a significant amount happening within Brighton and Hove, specifically around the digital sector. And then there's some really interesting stuff happening with the rural economy, particularly in West Sussex, where they're able to identify good, strong investment in horticulture and viticulture, which again sets the region apart in terms of what's happening when we compare it to the South East LEP and other LEP areas around the country. However, there isn't enough of this, and the benefits of this R&D activity are not spreading to other places, as I said before. There's a lot of detail within their report, but they think the main reason why this is happening is basically down to a lack of investment in R&D and innovation, and that is a lack of investment within universities. That is a lack of investment from businesses themselves, but very importantly, it's a lack of investment from government. The innovation assets that you have, the knowledge assets that you have within here, are just not receiving the amount of public sector investment in R&D that they need to be able to thrive. So again, in going into a negotiation with government on this, there's something very specific to talk about in terms of a conversation. Last slide from me. I was just asked to think about what all of this means for the evolving industrial strategy and how that might be structured. You're not going to be able to read these, so apologies. Point number one is really something that cuts across the whole local industrial strategy, and that is that this is not a single functional economic area. It is a collection of functional economic areas. And broadly, based on the evidence that we've analysed so far, you'd say you could split that into the area around Gatwick, some northern locations that are effectively commuter zones for London, and will probably always be commuter zones for London. The sort of rural area predominantly in mid and west Sussex, which, as I say, is becoming increasingly innovative and interesting as an economy and a functional economy in its own right. And then the area around Brighton, which is increasingly influencing the coastal locations, such as Newhaven, Lewis, Shoreham-on-Sea, Littlehampton. They're increasingly places that are within Brighton's economic sphere. I think by looking at the area in that sort of way, you're able to make more targeted and impactful interventions. The issue around around the age of the workforce. Getting more clever 20 to 40-year-olds in the area is fundamentally important. In the short term, addressing what businesses are telling us in terms of technical skills and employability is critical as well. There needs to be some relatively quick intervention within urban centres to address some of the challenges that we're identifying there. That's not just important to create nice places for us to go shopping and have a meal, but also to create the amenity that will stimulate the conversations, that will stoke the fire of the innovation economy. This point about innovation and funding of R&D is critical, and that needs to be addressed in very short order through the local industrial strategy, and more funding for digital infrastructure is absolutely critical as well. And then finally, last but not least, provision of good quality, market-facing commercial stock, particularly around Crawley, and Gatwick and Brighton and Hove, is going to be absolutely fundamental to the economic future of the region. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'd now like to welcome Claire Mason to the panel, one of our new board members, who's going to talk us through the challenge of turning all that information into compelling messages for government. Claire.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's really exciting to be here as one of the newest members of the Coast to Capital board. Despite the northern accent, I've actually lived and worked in this area and run a business in this area for more than 15 years. And like all of you, I'm here today because I really care about this place, our people, and our future prosperity. If you're wondering about the name, Man Bites Dog, it's actually the definition of a story. Dog bites man happens all the time. Man bites dog, on the other hand, is a story. It's an idea that's distinctive, it's memorable, and it's worth sharing. And in my day job at Man Bites Dog, what really interests me is that storytelling. So I'm particularly excited to be working with you all and the team to help tell the story of our exciting Coast to Capital area. The Coast to Capital area, as Jonathan shared, has so much to celebrate and we have so much potential. But at the moment, as we've heard from Chris, we're not fully seizing that opportunity. And if we don't take action on some of our key challenges now, the tide will go out on our opportunities, we will become less competitive, and we could see a deterioration in our area, our businesses, our public services, and our way of life. It would be easy to take the prosperity of our beautiful area for granted, and we have so much that other areas might envy. We have dynamic urban centres, like the creative capitals of Brighton, where I live, and Chichester, the economic powerhouses of Crawley and Leatherhead, and the growing potential of Worthing, Burgess Hill and Redhill. The international opportunity offered by Gatwick Airport and the growth engine of Manor Royal beside it. We also have our natural capital in the shape of our national park, our outstanding areas of natural beauty, and the Brighton and Lewes biosphere. We also have innovative businesses right across the region, from world-class wineries, I think Ridgeview are here today, to electric vehicle manufacturers, fuel cell makers, and of course our digital and creative industries. We also have a workforce that is highly skilled and highly motivated, from our business leaders and our public servants to our innovative entrepreneurs and our heroic commuters who are doing some very important jobs in the capital every day. But as we heard from Chris, when we look beneath the surface of our region, it's not all rosy. Our area is actually falling far behind and facing some critical challenges. Our most critical challenge is stagnating growth and productivity. While the Coast to Capital area has been a historically strong economy, in fact our 7th largest LEP, our economic growth has been in continued decline and it has not recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. Our growth rates are actually lower than English cities in the Midlands and the North, and we're being left behind by neighbouring LEPs right beside us, which are growing much faster. as well as these low growth levels, we're not as productive as we should be. As we heard, our total output has grown more slowly than comparable regions, and indeed the majority of LEPs. And our gross value added per head has declined steadily in real terms since 1999. There's also a marked productivity gap between places in our area. Our labour productivity is 2.5 times higher in Crawley than Arran, for example. So coming back to what Chris said, we're working in silos and we're not sharing that knowledge of how to improve our productivity. So whichever way you look at the numbers, the worry is that we could become a lot less competitive over time if we don't take action. We share with other LEPs the challenges of climate change, the death of some of our high streets, and the impact of, dare I say the B word, Brexit uncertainty. And the UK as a whole faces huge challenges with foreign direct investment. So as you can see here from the 2006 Brexit vote, we've had a steady and steep decline in foreign direct investment, and that matters because, as you can see, the line of jobs follows very closely the number of FDI projects that we can attract in this country. Meanwhile, Ireland has been very successful at becoming a multinational magnet and attracting, some might say, more than its fair share of foreign direct investment. So could we as an area think about how to increase our levels of FDI and get the investment we deserve, or maybe a little bit more as well? But all of these issues with growth, with productivity and investment, they're not just economic theory. There are some very real issues that sit behind it. Our urban centres remain highly sought after places to live, but the commuter wage disparity, our lack of housing supply and restrictions on space for development in some of our areas have all fuelled house price inflation and a critical shortage of business space, which is becoming a crisis in some of our key areas. We need to reduce our dependence on London and build a more sustainable economic base by providing affordable and mixed-use housing developments and also providing that critical business space to solve the business space crisis. So what we need to be thinking today is how might we be rethinking the use of our urban centres, improving our infrastructure and providing digital connectivity to breathe new life into declining centres and enable more of our residents to work in our area. Another challenge we face is the business profile of our region is very small and micro. And what that means is that while our great business birth rate is to be celebrated, we've recently been celebrated as one of the best places to start a business, what we really need to do now is help those businesses to grow. So we need to be thinking about what support could we give, what skills could we build, and how do we give them the space to scale up? And also, as I mentioned, how do we attract more large employers? And initiatives, as we've heard about, like the Growth Hub and the Escalator Programme, are really critical in helping our entrepreneurs go from micro businesses to small businesses to the medium-sized and large businesses of the future. Another issue, as Chris mentioned, is innovation. It's really surprising how low the level of investment in R&D is in our area, both in the public sector and the private sector, particularly considering the highly innovative and knowledge-intensive nature of a lot of the sectors in the region. So we need to think about how might big ideas like a higher education presence in the Gatwick Diamond area, an upskilled workforce and affordable and appropriate business space really help be a game changer to really supercharge our innovation. But probably the greatest key to fixing our productivity problem is improving our skills profile. We face a huge range of complex skills challenges. Firstly, the robots are coming. We must prepare our adult workforce for the skills of the future, with a focus on high-quality, lifelong learning. As Julie mentioned, social mobility is hindered by pockets of low skills along the coast and in Crawley, where we have low skills and unemployment in Crawley, but we also have high-skilled vacancies that are not being filled. Can we help people reach their potential to bridge that gap? And as Chris mentioned, we face problems hiring not only highly technical and senior roles in common with the rest of the country, but we also struggle to fill graduate and especially mid-level positions with factors including house prices causing that population pyramid that Chris showed us with the missing middle of skilled mid-level workers. So how could we create our own STEM skills base, and how can we retain the graduates that study here to be our workforce of the future? We also have a significantly smaller working age population than England's average, and a growing older population. How could we upskill people to reach their potential? And is it possible that some of our older workers might actually mitigate our skilled talent shortage if we can keep them in the workforce on a flexible basis for longer? But all these challenges can be overcome, but they're critical barriers to our future growth and prosperity and our ambition to be the best place in the UK to live, grow and succeed. With some targeted strategic interventions, together we can change this, but we're going to need vision and ambition if we're not to be left behind. The development of the local industrial strategy, otherwise known as our good friend Liz, obliges us to build on the strong foundations that you as a team have already created with Gatwick 360, our strategic economic plan. But let's ensure that this is not a paper exercise. We want to create something that will enable us to develop a collective vision and strategy for our area that will enhance what we're all doing across business, local government and education. We want a Liz that will secure the attention and investment of government, and we want a Liz that will help us attract the corporates and the FDI that will help power our future. So the big question is, what does a successful Liz look like? Well, firstly, we have quite a challenge. We must clearly articulate our comparative advantage. We need to identify the opportunities and strengths on which to build our future economy. We need to be thinking about big questions like, what's our USP? What do we do best? Where are we world class? Where can we beat other regions? And how do we beat that competition? As Jonathan mentioned, we've seen other LEPs focus on one core industry, but that's not so easy for us because we have so much diversity in terms of our geography with our urban, rural and coastal places, as well as our sort of Gatwick, London, Brighton commuter corridor, but also our sectors, which are going to be really critical to this. These sectors of expertise vary greatly by place, leading in areas from advanced manufacturing and financial services to creative industries and viticulture. Because Coast Capital as a place is so different and difficult to define, for us it won't be about placing our bets on one thing. It will be about finding a golden thread that will enable us to connect our region at a high level while being specific enough to be meaningful and useful. We don't fit neatly into a box, but that's what we've been asked to do. So getting that balance right is going to be quite a challenge, and we're going to have to make some quite tough decisions. The big question is, what future industries do we want government to think of when they think of our area? What's the shorthand? What's the big picture in their minds when they think of Coast Capital? And we need a sentence to be memorable, not a list of several things we do. So it's likely that we will have to pick one thing for the benefit of all. A bit like a V formation of geese, we're going to have to place some bets on our key strategic future industries and all line up behind it so that we can create a halo effect for the benefit of all. So we really need to focus on those core strengths. And we will really need your support to get behind this umbrella because it won't include every single one of us. We have to line up behind these key future bets because we can't afford to be trying to be all things to all people or so bland that we're meaningless. So in summary, what we're going to need is a strong vision and a common purpose to build confidence in the future and attract the investment that we need to deliver our potential. We need to think about what government and business should So how do we want government and business to think about us amongst the clamour of 37 other LEP areas? What do we want to be famous for? The second thing we really need to do is to create a distinctive identity for the region so that we can be known nationally and internationally to get the recognition, trade and investment that we deserve as a major part of the UK economy alongside the rest of the South East. And finally, once we've articulated where we can win our key brand for the region, we need to make a clear ask of government. We should be putting forward a number of eye-catching, transformative ideas with a key business case and a solid foundation of evidence. We'll be looking for big, investable ideas, and we'd like you to think about ideas and targeted interventions that will help stimulate growth, improve our productivity, and get us that innovation investment in our area. Things that will make a difference not only to our area, but to the South East and the wider country as a whole. Now, these kind of game-changing ideas that work across the boundaries of our LEP area and the areas around it are where we can collectively make the most impact. And we really need to do that, because to make a difference to the big challenges that we've touched on today and catch the attention of government, we need to scale up our ambitions and our ideas for the area. This is a very exciting challenge. It will not be easy, and we will need all of your help and support and ideas. But with a strong vision, we can build confidence in the future and attract the investment that we need to reach our potential and become the most dynamic non-city region in England. The whole Coast to Capital board and team are so grateful for all of the engagement that we've had so far with our big debates and our ongoing programme of work. And as Jonathan said, we'll shortly be moving into a consultation process on the evidence base. In the meantime, we really want to open up to ideas from all of you. And so we'd like to share this email address for anyone who wants to share any ideas later, which is bigideas@coasttocapital.org.uk. So please keep that and contact us with any ideas that you have. And of course, speak to any of the team here today. We're really keen to hear your ideas. And so we have, I'm trying to make up a little bit of time here. I think we've got about 10 minutes. Fabulous. For a quick Q&A with Jonathan and the very appropriately named Chris Paddock here today. For any questions that you might have. Sorry, I couldn't just let Jonathan be the only one with a cheesy horse-based pun. So for any questions that you might have, any ambitions for our area, and any game-changing project ideas. So as before, we're going to use a mix of Slido and a couple of roving mics I think we have at the back. And so I think what we'll do is we'll kick off with a couple of questions from the floor, and then if people can start putting some questions, some ideas, some thoughts through Slido as well, then we'll pick those up too. So could I have a volunteer the first question, please? And would you mind saying who you are and where you're from as you introduce?
I work for Ricardo, and I'm a member of Greater Brighton's Economic Board and Greater Brighton's Infrastructure Panel. And my question, also on there, it's bounced around. How will we meet the challenge by government to become carbon neutral, probably for 2050, if it's not too late, and thrive economically? We've had a lot of economic data, but we haven't heard the environmental argument.
That's a great question. Who would like to take that one? Jonathan, do you want to start?
I'd love to. I mean, I don't have the straight answer to it, Andrew. You'll be maybe disappointed to hear, but it is absolutely the question to ask. And I think within local industrial strategies, what government is saying is they want to see how regions are going to approach clean growth. That's the phrase they're using. Now, many different parts of the country are interpreting that in different ways. You know, if you're a major industrial part of the country like Humberside, it means something very different to an area like ours. If you're an area like the Southwest with the Hinkley Power Station, they've got a completely different opportunity to us. The ideas I am very interested in are our patterns of travel and our patterns of commuting within the region, because actually one of the largest generators of carbon is people's private cars, and you know the extent to which so much travel in the region is dependent on car use is very interesting. I think there's something about future planning and the extent to which local plans are anticipating and building that in. Across this region, wherever you are and whatever people's political affiliation is, there is a huge interest in maintaining the beautiful environment that we live in. And I think there's something there about the model of growth in our region that puts, you know, protecting the environment first, because I think wherever you live, people do see a beautiful environment out of the window and they want to protect it. But it's absolutely going to be one of the themes to work on and a possible candidate for the golden thread that Claire identified.
I mean, we've been doing these strategies for sort of 15 odd years, and that low carbon piece, environmental sustainability piece, was always something you thought about, but it sort of happened over there, and you did it to make yourself kind of feel better. It's kind of fundamental now. I think it's the number one priority for any economic strategy, and it has to be fundamental in what you're thinking about in the buildings that you build, in how people travel to work, in the businesses that you encourage to invest in your area. It's kind of fundamental. There are great examples of cities and regions, certainly in Europe, that have done this very well. If you want a really great example, practical example, there's a business park near Schiphol Airport called Park 2020. It is 100% reusable or biodegradable. So when that business park ceases to exist, there will be no carbon impact from its existence. They're the sort of ideas that you need to be thinking about as you develop your LIS. And I think the LEP has to be here to challenge you to think harder about that.
I think, as you say, it's a very good candidate for a golden thread, but actually thinking about sustainable growth rather than low carbon as an alternative to growth. I think it's quite interesting that we are moving as businesses from doing what we want to do to grow and then offsetting our impact to actually thinking about how do we build positive purpose into our businesses in the first place, and how do businesses like Ricardo lead that environmental future through the development of, whether it's electric engines or whatever that might be. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity to work with business so that low carbon doesn't mean low growth. And I think we have a lot of opportunities as a region. We have some more questions on here, which is great. Let's have a look. How do we better engage SMEs in the digital sector with young people and teachers to feed aspiration and opportunity to young people?
Say that again, sorry.
It's how do we better engage SMEs in the digital sector with young people and teachers to feed aspiration and opportunity to young people? So it's about connecting business with
question. Yeah,
digital.
I mean, the importance of engaging young people in the opportunities of working in this region is a constant theme of the job that Coast Capital does through our enterprise coordinators and all the businesses we have working in schools around the region. But as Chris's population graph showed very, very powerfully, this is a region that young people leave, and this is a region that does not attract its fair share nationally of 20, 30-somethings. People come when they're older, but they don't come, when they think of themselves as young. I mean, we all think of ourselves as young on one level, but, genuinely young. So the role of businesses that can grab people's attention is key, and if that's digital businesses, small businesses, or any other kind of business, so much the better. But what people need to be able to build a life here is a good income and a good salary, because it's an expensive area. So businesses that can offer good career development, good skill training, a good path to future, and escape from a 2-hour commute to London every day to earn a decent salary, I think those businesses will be successful. But young people are absolutely the key to it, because that's where the future workforce is coming from.
I think Wide Sussex have done some really interesting stuff on this, on careers. The one thing that I always think about when we get involved in skills studies is it just needs to be more exciting and a bit more dynamic. We sort of tend to think, right, you go to university, get out of university, right, go and get a job. If you don't get a job, then, you've somehow failed. But it becomes a very formulaic process to what is the thing that people do with most of their time. And I think just being more positive about careers, both in terms of the businesses themselves talking about the opportunities that they have, but also engaging young people is really important. And I think the careers and workforce development process at the moment just feels a bit dull, and that's not here, that's in the country as a whole.
I do believe Coast Capital actually has an initiative which connects businesses with schools as well. What's that called, please? So let's all get involved in the Enterprise Advisor Network. And I think we have 100 businesses here today. And the reason I got involved with Coast Capital is that for some of these challenges, the LEP can't fix it on their own. As business leaders, we've all got to get involved. So I think getting more of your friends and colleagues actually involved in helping to fix this is a really good way forward. So it's great that we've got so much engagement here today. We have a great question here from Jeremy Taylor. Can you talk about how you might encourage foreign direct investment and support local businesses in their post-Brexit international ambitions?
We do have to think about how we as a region are going to be known nationally and internationally. There's some really exciting things happening in other parts of the country. For example, in Manchester, there's another business park by Manchester Airport, which is designed and built with the Chinese market in mind. So, designed as the place that Chinese businesses will come to in the UK if they want to establish a presence in the UK. And coincidentally promoted by the Premier League clubs that are in Manchester, which have very strong brand presence in China. So, there are, it's not an easy thing to do, but we absolutely have to look at ourselves and work out what does this region offer, which no one else offers. Now we have the airport, we have Brighton and Hove, we have a number of places within the region that are of international significance. We're actually in one of them today. You know, there's brand recognition for Epsom Racecourse all around the world, given what it does, what happens here. We just need to get a lot better and be a lot better organised and a lot more purposeful, I think, in how we get our act together. Because as the slide showed, foreign investment, especially in the world of Brexit, foreign investment will drive much of the economic growth in the UK. So we have to make sure it comes here rather than going to the big cities of the North and the Midlands, which it will otherwise naturally flow to. So that would be my view.
I think that also touches on the brand for our region. So when large multinationals are considering where to site their headquarters, what do they think of when they think of us? They probably don't think of us at all. We need to change that. But with Gatwick, we do have an opportunity. We need the space, but also from a small business perspective, actually small businesses can help each other. So there's a lot of businesses in Brighton that help each other with US exporting, for example. And the Escalator programme supported by Coast Capital brings small businesses together to share their learnings. And I think that could also be a key area of help. Did you have anything to add to that, Chris, or shall I jump to the next?
Jump to the next one.
So what's top of the... Oh, here we go. So... pick one here. I'm going to pick the second one while I decode the first one. Are there new revenue funds for rural skills and business support?
I think this is. I think the straight answer is no. And I should have been more clear in my presentation. Future funding to any region is not yet clear because of the circumstances around Brexit. But we expect the local industrial strategy to unlock future funding. So as we leave the EU, the European structural funds, which funds a lot of this work, will end. And the government has pledged to open up a new fund, a shared prosperity fund, that will deliver its regional strategy. Getting the local industrial strategies right is the right way to do that. And so that's what we're working very hard for.
And there's a great question here from Steve Sawyer that speaks to what we were saying about complacency and the perception that our region is all rosy, but actually under the surface not so much. The Coast Capital LEP area is already highly successful and affluent. How much of an issue is this for securing support from government?
So we work on a lot of business cases to government. When you write a business case, you always write your reference case. What would happen if you don't make this investment or you don't deliver this policy? And I think actually articulating the reference case through the evidence we've collected is really important, because I think what we're seeing is kind of at best a flattening out. So whilst the area at the moment is pretty affluent and pretty successful, if we don't do anything in 20 years' time, then it will be less affluent and less successful. So you build your case on that scenario. And I think because there has been a bit of a decline in recent years, the headroom for growth is definitely there. So I think we can now, because we've got good evidence, we can start to build a more robust case for investment in terms of what this region can deliver for the UK as a whole.
And I think we're out of time, actually, aren't we? But thank you all for all your questions. And actually, those raise huge amounts of issues that we can all take back as a team and review. And please do talk to us a little bit later this afternoon about them as well. Thank you all very much. I'll hand back to Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. Before I leave the stage, I'd just like to reintroduce Julie Capsalis and Wincy Wong, our colleague, who are going to talk through some other issues affecting the region. Thank you.
So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Wincy today, who is head of the Rose Review implementation. She has a very impressive biography, which I haven't got time to go through, but I'm going to pull out a couple of my favourite facts. You refer to yourself as a digital evangelist, and you're a co-founder of NatWest's Girls Can Code project and Tech She Can, an organisation that works to increase the number of women in tech roles. But Wincy is also a serial entrepreneur and featured in season 2 of BBC's My £1 Million Menu. We're not going to talk too much about that today, maybe another time, because I want to focus on the Rose Review. Yes. And I was thrilled to be asked to contribute. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the background as to how it came into being, the commissioning and the key area it looks at.
Absolutely. So the issue of female entrepreneurs in this country has long been known. And it was something that HM Treasury in particular was really interested in. They wanted to commission a report. Now, we as a bank, as RBS, and underneath which NatWest is one of our large brands, we are the largest bank for SMEs in the UK. And we also happen to have a CEO whose name was Alison Rose, who leads, who is our CEO of our commercial and our private bank, of which the SMEs roll up into. So it just made perfect sense. The Treasury asked Alison if she would be willing to write that report. We were really excited and happy to do so, so she did. That report was launched on International Women's Day this year. It has been gotten some tremendously positive feedback, I would say, and it's galvanized quite an important body of work. Within the report itself, it's highlighted 8 major initiatives that are constantly, that is my current job, which is to roll out these 8 initiatives. What's really important to remember, though, and understand, is that when we wrote the report, it was meant to be a non-competitive sport. There is such a dearth of female entrepreneurs, and the economic impact of bringing them to start and scale businesses at the same rate as men in this country is so vast and huge that actually there is more than enough for everyone to do. And therefore, a lot of what we do is not meant to be RBS or NatWest branded, although we are big supporters and pushing the initiative through, but very much about collaborating with all the LEPs around the country, as well as all the banks that cover the country to help support entrepreneurship.
And I think the point you make about the economic imperative to me is key. The statistic that I was struck by in the report, and I'll just read it, is that up to £250 billion of new value could be added to the UK economy if women started and scaled new businesses at the same rate as men. Can you maybe pick up on the economic potential more? I think also reflecting on the current uncertain economic and political situation we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. So it's, I think we had some great information, I think, today about the economy and where we are. And there, I think, first of all, if you look across the UK, there isn't a lot of slack, I would say, in the economy. And what the report found, it was very data-driven, and what we found is that it would be over £250 billion of value added to the economy, the overall UK economy, if women were to both start and scale businesses at the same rate as men. And what we found in the report is that it was at every stage. It wasn't that they all started at the same and then they just had differences when it came to scaling, etc. It's only 1 in 3 entrepreneurs across the UK are women. And what we found is that it was at every single stage, from intention to start, to actually starting it, to sustaining it, to actually growing it. Now, one of the things that we mentioned is that the UK is one of the top areas for foreign investment across the EU, and certainly internationally, it's top 7. And one of the areas that we get invested in quite a lot is in technology and in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths areas. It is an area that the UK is actually really proud of, certainly in artificial intelligence and all these kinds of new technologies. And in the report, unfortunately, we also found that because women in this country opt out of those subjects in both education and in disciplines and in working, I think the most recent studies is about only 22% of all roles in STEM subjects across the UK are filled by women, for example. They naturally don't go into those sectors when you talk about entrepreneurship as well. And what that means is if they're not going into those sectors, the most productive sectors, then they are missing out. And also the UK economy itself is also missing out on half the population's brain power, if you want to say that. So what I would say is there's definitely uncertainty when it comes to Brexit. However, the investment in STEM subjects and productive type sectors have not slowed down in the last 3 years, even with the uncertainty of Brexit, that has been something that has always been top of mind. So the UK is still seen as a big hub. London is still a big centre. There's definitely areas around the country who are excelling in those areas worldwide.
And you talked about some of the barriers that you identified. Just briefly, can you highlight some of those barriers and what the Rose Review is now recommending is done about them?
Yes. So the barriers, there were 5 key barriers that we found in the report. I think and they fall into different categories depending on whether it was someone starting a business or whether it was someone trying to scale a business. So what I would say is number 1 is access to finance, funding. This is an issue, I would say, and let me just emphasize that these barriers are not new barriers. They are barriers that apply to both male and female entrepreneurs. However, when you are in a marginalized background, they are amplified. So the barriers become even bigger. So as much as for example, when you talk about access to finance, women were asking for about 50% less capital than men. So because of that, they don't necessarily have the feel that they need to run and scale and grow those businesses as quickly as maybe the male entrepreneurs. The second one that we saw was family care. So family care, so in this country, women spend 60% more time on family care than the men. And because of that, female entrepreneurs with children, for example, cited family care as the number 1 reason for why they weren't scaling their businesses. And that is important. Now, also because there's a related one to the remaining 3 as well, because they spend all that time with the family care, and if you saw that chart about aging population, we also have the problem where the burden of taking care of the aging population tends to fall upon the women in this country as well. So you kind of get hit from both sides, and plus that means when they're dealing with this, they have less time to network, find mentors, and to find people that are critical to continuing to stay and grow their businesses. And then the last 3 were around risk awareness. So there is, females tend to, or the female entrepreneurs we studied as part of the report, have a higher awareness of whether or not, of the risk involved in setting up and starting and scaling a business. And as a result, sometimes that will keep them from actually starting or growing their businesses in a certain way. So it's important to understand that this isn't, some things that people tend to say is confidence. It's not about confidence. They're perfectly confident of starting and building their businesses. It was more around the more awareness, higher awareness of what the risks are in starting them, and therefore they might be less likely to do so.
Conscious of time,
Oh,
I
sorry,
may
I can
hold
go
us on
forever.
the other 2.
Yes.
I could as well. We could be in terrible trouble. But I want to bring us that back to particularly the first area you talked about, access to finance,
Yes.
because one of the things I think we're really proud of at Coaster Capital is that we are the first LEP, the only LEP, to be piloting the banker in residence, and really thrilled that our banker in residence, Vicky Stevens, is here today. Can you talk to us specifically about that programme and the benefits you think it could bring?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we found that's important that I've already spoken about is accessibility. So that's access to finance, to expertise, and one of the things that we want to do is to be able to launch a program of experts in residence across all the LEPs around the country. And that's a variety of different experts depending on needs. One of the things that was easy for us to identify, and actually Bayes as a government as well, identified was the need for bankers. Vicky herself actually has been spending the last few months in Costa Capital. Actually, Vicky, would you mind just coming up and spending maybe 40 seconds? 40 seconds on the experience and the types of things you've been working on with the Costa Capital Lab.
Yes, I have to say firstly, so I've been working with Costa Capital for about 3 months now. My experience has been nothing but positive. The team have been absolutely great, engaging with me, working through our initiatives through the Rose Review. We've been going out and running sort of joint appointments when we're going out and seeing customers and businesses together, collaborating on events, particularly looking at things around the finance aspect as well. And And to echo Julie's words earlier, the Coastal Capital region is really diverse, and I think it's actually been invaluable having the likes of myself and perhaps other experts in residence working with other LEPs across the UK, because we're able to understand the support that you guys can offer, particularly from the Growth Hub, in more detail. So that's only going to support more and more businesses. So I just hope, actually, given how sort of open and welcoming you guys have been, that the other LEPs are going to do the same if we roll it.
Absolutely. And to probably recap on kind of the areas of the Rose Review is starting to tackle, the first thing is the access to finance. So we've launched, this is back in July at Downing Street, we launched a new Investing in Women code. And this has been signed up to by 9 banks, including ourselves, as well as Lloyds and Barclays, TSB Santander, Bank of Ireland, and so on. And what we've agreed is that we would disclose how much we're investing in women collectively, and we would also agree that we would adopt best practices when it comes to investing in women, of which we're hoping that our example of starting with experts in residence takes flight. There's also a desire to set up a new investment vehicle for investing in women, and setting up a sub-council that will focus on the particular stat that we found, that less than 1% of VC funding were going to female entrepreneurs. So those are the areas that we're focused on. In terms of family care, what I spoke about there, we are also looking at launching a suite of banking products that are related to supporting female entrepreneurs, or all entrepreneurs, with family care responsibilities. And then in that accessibility, it is taking what Vicky's done and that wonderful pilot. So you guys have been a shining example of what we can do when we work so closely with the labs and the local growth hubs, and actually rolling that out across the nation. We wanted to start with bankers, and that's already in train. We're going to be rolling that out very soon. However, we also want to look at other experts, because I think you very much said in the other things that we saw, there is a need for other types of skills, digital skills or other types of skills, and that is extremely important as well.
And I think we're going to probably have to hold that thought. Yes. We're meeting in London next week to plot some of this. And in the last 10 seconds, if you were going to give us as a LEP everything you've heard today, one challenge of what we should be doing.
Oof, I can't stick to just one challenge, but I will try to encapsulate a lot under one.
In 10 seconds.
In 10 seconds. I would encourage an increased collaboration across the private sectors, to really listen to your businesses to see what are the experts that they need support with, and to work with us in terms of bringing the bankers and residents. So who's next? What should we be doing? And also, we touched on education. We are working with the Department for Education and across education to try to pull together new materials to help the next generation in terms of entrepreneurship as well. So what are the areas, what are the skills that your constituency, that your local areas need? And to feed that back so that we can do that both for your LEP and also at a national level.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Wincy. We have time potentially just for a couple of very quick questions.
I was very interested in your claim that women typically apply for less than 50% the capital that men would apply for in a similar context. Do you have any data about the outcome results and which are the more successful, given that 50% less investment? Is there any comparison in terms of the value that they've created within, say, a 5-year period?
Absolutely. So that's a really good question. In terms of overall detail of the females entrepreneurs, I would say that only 0.6% of the females who do go into businesses actually end up turning over £1 million or more. And that's at a much lower rate than the male entrepreneurs overall. So that less, it's a combination of a lot of things. I can't pinpoint it to one reason, so we can't really say capital is the only reason that they succeed or they don't succeed. It's a combination of all those factors I talked about, the lack of time, network, mentors. Mentors are so important in order to grow successful businesses. And that's something that, on average, they, in the report, we found that they said they had less of.
for one last question.
Hi, I'm Helen Clack. I'm a county councillor in Surrey. I think you're inspirational, and how can we get you to come and talk to some of our local groups and areas? I think the idea that, you know, women entrepreneurs, who I know people, I'm a woman entrepreneur, I used to be, you know, before I became a councillor. Accessing finance from banks and support is terrifying a lot of the time, and we'll do anything, parents, friends, relatives, you know, or even online, you know, funding. It would be really helpful to have you come and talk to our business groups about, particularly about women accessing finance, and all the advice that you and your fantastic review can give to our businesses, particularly females. Are you able to do that?
Absolutely, I would love to support if my diary allows me to do so. Even if I can't, I promise you that someone like Vicky or another woman in business specialist from our bank would be more than happy to come and speak to your local businesses. One thing I will say is that in terms of access to finance, I've done lots of research on this for small businesses amongst our customer base. And really, the bank is usually the last place they'll go for financing, whether you're a male or female. I've seen so many businesses bank their whole business on a credit card at high interest rates and all kinds of behaviors. However, as I said, it's amplified when you're in marginalized areas. And I've spoken to so many women, female entrepreneurs who don't call themselves entrepreneurs, by the way. They are afraid of that term, or they don't like that term. They tend to like to say business owner. And there are so many barriers there. And sometimes what it is that need for a helping hand. So if you know someone else who's gone to a bank and was successful in getting a loan, you are way more likely to actually go and apply for that as well. And that is really important. So the need to get more of those stories out there.
That's great. Helen, I think you've definitely got our commitment that
Yes.
between us and Vicky, we will come and do this, yeah. So
We are.
I'm afraid we are out of time. Wincy, thank you so much for coming today, and
Thank
to be
you.
continued.
Absolutely,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
So we are nearing the end of this afternoon, and I feel I'm replacing not as interesting a replacement as Winnie and Julie there. It was wonderful. Thank you very, very much. So we do have, what I'm going to do is just do the formalities of the AGM, which will be fairly quick. A quick review of our board, because I do think it's important for people to understand who we have around our board and what a great board we have in terms of helping with this, with the LEP. So, first of all, I'm going to do the formalities of the AGM, and the minutes from the 2018 AGM can be found online and are approved here today. The accounts for the year ended 31st March 2009 were approved by the board at its meeting on 10th July and can be found online. Just a quick run through the board, and I think this, I won't labour the point, but I really did want to make the point that what a wonderful and diverse board we have, and what a strong board we have. So here myself as chairman, with an outstanding chief executive, with Jonathan Sharrock, and as we said before, we're incredibly pleased that Julie has taken on the role as vice chairman and doing it with real aplomb. We then have some business board members, and again, to give you a sense of the sort of people we have around the table, Jamie Arnell is a partner of Charterhouse Venture Capital, one of the biggest venture capital companies in the UK, I think 14 billion under management. Karen Jukes is a non-executive and a distinguished former PwC partner with a great financial expertise. Martin Harris, and we're working along the top there, runs the buses in Brighton and runs Metro Bus, and again you can see the expertise that he can bring to us. Richard Hopkins runs a company called Fargrow that supplies the horticultural sector, so again you can see how we're covering that incredibly important sector. Amanda Jones is Finance Director of the Brighton Dome and very involved in the arts, Deputy Chief Executive of the arts across the coast. David Joy is a very distinguished developer. He was the developer behind Stratford, developer behind King's Cross, and he's now on our board, and we're very, very privileged to have him. Mike Leroy is a senior manager in American Express, somehow finds time amongst a very senior role in Amex to give a lot to the LEP. Rosalind Laird is our Croydon rep and has very, very experience in property services. And finally, Claire, you know, who's been here in front of us, and you can see what fantastic attribute Claire is for the board and her company, Man Bites Dog. And one of the things about the LEP is how it draws together business and public sector. And so we have on the board Louise Goldsmith, the leader of West Sussex, Colin Kemp, deputy leader of Surrey, Tony Newman, the leader of Croydon, Nancy Platts, the leader at Brighton, and we then have from the districts Mark Brunt from Reigate and Banstead and Dan Humphries from Worthing. You can see that these are very senior politicians, very eminent politicians in our area, so it's really great that we've got the politicians and businesses around the table together. And then finally, in terms of the board, we have Francis Rutter from Nescott, so further education, and we have the Vice-Chancellor of Sussex University, Adam Tickell. So what I suppose I'd like to say is that isn't that a wonderful group of people? We're incredibly lucky to have them around the board. I feel very privileged, a bit surprised that I'm somehow chairing them, because they're a lot more eminent than I am. But nevertheless, what a great board, and I think that you can feel very confident in this board in terms of the vital work we do. We're also aware, and as Julie mentioned very nicely, that Darryl Gaylor has been unwell. Actually, Jonathan and myself went to see him a couple of weeks ago. Has been very seriously hurt by his stroke, but the progress he's making is just wonderful. And I felt absolutely inspired when I came out of seeing him in that meeting. The change from, say, 3-4 months ago, where it was quite hard to be there with him, to now is amazing. And I think he's going to be back up and, not necessarily up and running, but really making a great recovery relative to what's happened to him. Our further items are the capital articles have been updated in line with our governance, and they are online. So if you are interested, do have a look. And I'd also like to commend the annual report, which is also online. I thought what I'd do is also conclude really with some thoughts that I have about what we've just heard, and really maybe remind us a little bit about the sort of things we were hearing, because I think it's been a wonderful afternoon and very, very interesting. I thought Julie's introduction was excellent, and I share your passion, Julie, for diversity in its widest sense. So it's not just, it is a more nuanced thing, and the work you're doing, as I said, my understanding of diversity has improved dramatically. Thank you very much for that. Jonathan, a great overview on the success of the LET, delivery focus, those impressive outputs, wonderful projects, the Fairfield Hall. I think we're all going to enjoy Gatwick Airport Station when it's done. I'm looking forward to that. Don't hold your breath. Nevertheless, I mean, 10 years' time, there's going to be a wonderful station there, or I don't know how long, 5 years' time maybe. I think the 5G testbed is, again, very impressive. 800 businesses supported through the Growth Hub, and very proud of our escalator programme. And the support we're going to try and give to businesses during Brexit, I think, is going to be well worthwhile. And you can see the emphasis now we're having on the local industrial strategy. And I was very impressed, Jonathan, with the enthusiasm and openness and your willingness to listen. And we're very much here for everybody to listen to you. Chris, I enjoyed your presentation very much, very lively, and that is economic stats done in a lively manner. Well, urban status, commercial property, skills, R&D, innovation and digital. Very, very useful data. I think it shows we're doing okay. It shows we're very mixed in our region. Some parts are brilliant, some parts are a little less good. It shows I think you have to sort of balance the fact we can do better with the fact that we're doing very, very well in certain areas. I think it gives me a great deal of confidence that we understand where we are, and for any bit of work that we do, it's important to understand that, have a good evidence base of our diverse area, and that enables us to make the right decisions in terms of investment. It was striking, I thought, the lack of 25 to 40-year-olds, and you can see how housing affordability is part of the cause of that, but that graph is pretty interesting. An excellent list of summary actions, and I thought that would be well worth a reread for everybody. And again, the point was made, we really are up for your comments from the consultation, so thank you very much on that. Claire, yes, a compelling call to action. Why am I not surprised about that? Let's not take our prosperity for granted. We have great potential. We have some incredibly dynamic areas, a great deal of natural capital, very skilled people. It's such a wonderful area. We're so proud of it. You can see the potential there. But the point is that there is some stagnation of growth and productivity in the overview. We can be quite inconsistent. So we just do need to address those issues that are slightly weaker. We can see the business profile of small businesses not quite growing as one would hope. You can also see the need for skills, the need for lifelong learning. And then that's linked back very nicely into our LIS. We need to think about our comparative advantage, our distinctive identity, and we need a clear ask. I'm very confident that the board will create the compelling message from the LIS. I'm sure that Claire particularly will help us create the compelling message based on the massive amount of research and hard work from all the team and with all your help. And I thought the Q&A epitomised the sort of feedback we're going to get and the sort of questions that we'll have from everybody. So again, we very much look forward to the feedback, and the consultation is going to be very seriously done by us, and we're really going to listen. Finally, Julie and Winnie Wincy Wong, that was a great fun and a very serious message. As I say, I felt a bit ashamed coming up here and cutting you off, but nevertheless. What a serious message, really, female entrepreneurs. What an amazing opportunity. The 250 billion figure is a very striking figure, and even if we get halfway or a quarter of the way to that, something amazing has happened. Let's get these women into the STEM subjects, which I think we should, and certainly I'm actually hearing that is happening a wee bit. 5 key barriers, of which we heard 3, because Julie, you were running very strict there. But perhaps access to finance and family care, and that point about how they're there for men, but they're amplified for women, and we've just got to do something about it. I quite agree. So lots of compelling stats, very clear action plan. That's great, really very, very impressive. So that really was what I took from it, from our day. I thought it was really good. I want to say thank you to Jonathan and the team for all the hard work they do. I do want to pay tribute to Jonathan as a just fantastic chief executive. We're very pleased to have him with us. So in conclusion, I say please feed us back on this consultation. We really are listening. We really do want to hear what everybody says. And I can now release you for drinks, which have been very, very kindly sponsored by DMH Stallard. So I look forward to talking with you later. Many thanks.